Tonight's sermon is entitled, To Appear Serious or To Not Appear Serious. Everyone is born with a sense of urgency, but once you reach your programmed peak, it begins to diminish. A mystic is one who rejuvenates himself. The young mind is too unfocused and inexperienced. The old one too full and complacent. For this kind of thing, another kind of mind is required. To agree or disagree with someone else's opinion is not what I'd call thinking. How about you? Teasing people's minds will never excite them enough to make mysticism a popular sport or entertainment. All advice comes wrapped in sham enthusiasm due to the fact that no one knows what they're talking about. When done correctly, humor acts as a physician, one engaged in healing. Give you the other version, at least that slipped through. When done correctly, a humorist acts as a physician, one engaged in healing. There's a reason I changed it, and perhaps it'll become obvious if I get around to it or not. The opening about the sermon was not all humor either, to appear serious or not to appear serious. And pertinent, at least I'll make it so, in the mail came from Europe a new book list that they thought that somebody here might be interested in. But anyway, it has to do with, they pulled out someone's notes. It's someone who recently died that was he or she was a offshoot of a fairly modern, fairly well-known mystic who is now also deceased. But at any rate, here is a retelling of a very common story. It's in the advertising. Promotion for all of her books now. So-and-so taught that the aim of our religion is to change man's level of consciousness and being and to teach him to live according to his own divinely ordained nature. Every religion, says she, has a, quote, inner teaching which is basically the same, though, through which man can seek to reach his highest destiny. This teaching, she's referring to this inner teaching, is periodically renewed throughout the ages by the coming of great mystical teachers and through the lives of certain holy men, etc., etc. Is that not in a real sense, if you're operating at that level, is that not a comforting thought? It is. Well, it's not a new one, but is it not yet intended to be comforting? And the reason I bring it out is not to make fun of it, of course, because I can do better than that. But this is a new generation of students, of, I'm sure, what she considered to be, in her references to periodically the inner teaching of religions that seek, whose aim is to raise man's level of consciousness and being, that periodically it's renewed constantly throughout the ages, but periodically through the appearance of a great mystical teacher, some great person. And I'm assuring you, I'm not going into details, but she's referring to the person that she studied from who died in our lifetime. Was kind of a Western carrier of some of the, sort of a combination of some of the Eastern traditions. But consider this is still on the basis, and we're talking about somebody who would now, comparatively speaking, that is the teacher that she's referring to, that she studied from, comparably speaking, the person would be more direct, more point blank, because of the fact that they were more contemporaneous, but they would be more germane to our times and would be simply the general writings in the overall religious literature or even mystical literature. It was a specific person here in the general environment of our day and time. And she is pointing out that which has always been believed, and I'm not laughing and telling you that it's incorrect, but the wording, the comforting wording, that this kind of inner teaching, if that be true, that all religion has some sort of inner teaching, that the real core was not what the public necessarily thinks, and it's always been there, but it must be renewed periodically by the appearance of some great person. The sermon is to be serious, to appear to be serious. Can't remember my own sermon. To appear to be serious, or to not appear to be serious. In the few items I read, those of you that were tuned in last time, you know that we sort of left off in that general area, where again we were talking about a kind of seriousness, a kind of sense of urgency, and again about entertainment. And this sense of urgency, I want to go back to that. I almost made a whole little legend out of it. It was what the first page was, that everyone is born with a sense of urgency, but once you reach your program peak, it begins to diminish. Now this sense of urgency, you could also look at in the beginning as being life itself, because at the bio-survival level, what is more urgent than staying alive? And, to use my two-dimensional drawing of the individual and collective human nervous system, and looking at that as the level of consciousness, the level at which men become men, but everything from here down the bio-survival level, just staying alive, individually and collectively, there is certainly a sense of urgency. We have the same kind of sense of urgency as we would share with any sort of creature on this planet. But once you have reached your program peak, which about amounts to becoming mature, that as you have already, obviously if you're ordinary and sane, you have already had the intellect, the line up there above just the survival level, it has already become ignited, let's say at the age of 5, and so now at your age, let's say of 21, you have had all those years, but the age of 21 more or less, what people refer to as being matured and grown up, you have reached your program peak. It just coincidentally, more or less, it's not important, but coincides with the peak of your physical prowess. That just in general, by the time you hit your 20s, men or women, this is of no great importance, but just so that you make the distinction, I'm not just talking about physically. But you know that, in a sense, you begin to die. That you just go up to a certain peak and then down. And that's no great secret, and biologists and just ordinary people that read certain common literature go, oh yeah, I know that. But they do not realize it having to do with the area above the survival level. That there is a program peak after which it begins to diminish also. You don't begin to just lose muscle tone. You don't begin just to lose, even in a gradual degree, physical strength. You begin to lose the intellectual strength. And you must consider that you have had, if this would be true, you have a very narrow, very short-lived window of opportunity, as I think they say in the space program and in certain bordellos around New Orleans. Once you reach the program peak, it begins to diminish. Now you certainly, any ordinary person, you will stay alive physically and intellectually enough to talk, but you are going to live then for a handful of more decades after that. But in one sense, you have seen this kind of sense of urgency in the intellect. You have seen it already begin to flicker. It is already dying out, and for all intents and purposes, it is shortly after it begins to diminish, it is dead. And if you don't believe that, all you've got to do is go out in your backyard and try to arm wrestle the old proverb that says you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. Now don't bother even wasting your time fighting and wrestling with an old dog. Wrestle with the proverb. And those of you who get really good, you can save yourself the trouble of going outside because the weather could be inclement. You can stay inside and wrestle with yourself in such a way as this. Try to think differently. Of course, after trying that, many people decide, well, no matter if it is sprinkling a bit, I think I'll go outside and wrestle Rover. It seems to offer more promise of It just seems to offer more promise. And the idea of seriousness and entertainment, to bring it into this sense of urgency. If you consider all the myths that have on this planet, all the way from Greek and Egyptian, or even Egyptian times, up until today, the myths and the stories having to do with man's birth, death, and then possible rebirth. Looked at on the basis of a sense of urgency. Once you reach your program peak and you're losing the sense of that kind of urgency of staying alive, physically and otherwise, as you lose it, people seek to replace it with something. With many, many people, even today, they attempt to replace it with religion. It's probably still the most common. And to expand it a bit, verbally, to be concerned about social questions, social problems, politics, even the world of entertainment, just in general, just of frivolous distraction. But look at religion, for instance. Once you pass the point of this sense of urgency, to make it a crude possible example, again, I point out, let's say just a person who had some real burning interest in life, that you were a kid and you wanted to grow up to be a baseball player, or you wanted to grow up to be an astronaut or a musician. And you reach a point that, for all sorts of reasons, that you give up the interest. You may still talk about it, and you can explain why you did it. It is, in a sense, those of you who know, they're very common blues songs that everyone sings without knowing it. And a very common line in various ways has to do with, come on baby, it's usually a man singing, but do your own sexual version of it. But, baby, help me spend my money tonight. Somebody, you're looking good, come over here, I got a pocket full of dough and help me. You follow. It's like, I'm all dressed up and I don't really have much to do. Hey, I like you, you're looking good, come over here, I got a pocket full of money, and hey, let's blow it. I don't want to do it alone. But you can say, well, that's just funny. But it's actually more than that, it's a myth. And I'll tell you why. It's somebody saying, if you think about it a second and you looked at it as being potentially a mythical message, you'd have to say, well, wait a minute, it's an unprofitable message. Why would anybody do that? Because what they're saying is, come over here and help me get broke. It's Saturday night so that I can get up on Monday. I have to get up on Monday and I'll have to go back to work. It is a low-level attempt to compensate for losing the sense of urgency. I was going to point out first, religion, the way it replaces, is actually not even attempting to replace a sense of urgency so much as it is to offer comfort. Because religion in general requires nothing. It requires you to be there and require you to pay money, more or less. Require you to give lip service to something, but it actually requires almost nothing. It certainly requires no sense of urgency. If there's any urgency apparently afoot, it must come from the one leading it, from a minister, a rabbi, a prophet. Somebody has got to stir them up. And even if there seems to be some sort of sense of, and it'd really be better said excitement rather than urgency, because it is simply a form of entertainment. If you cannot rejuvenate yourself, if you cannot feel a sense of urgency, if you must go somewhere to be religious, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you must go somewhere to feel religious, or whatever religious persuasion you're attempting to be or profess to be, if you must go somewhere to have it whipped up, then you are engaged in entertainment. You may become excited and entertained, which is fine, but it is not a sense of urgency, which for those of you that really like to have the rat-ass info thrown on you early, I remind you again that this sort of thing, real mysticism, this sort of thing, these great tradition in the secret core of religion, it doesn't exist anywhere to anybody unless it exists in you right now. Not later, not yesterday. So we'll Maybe if I say that enough, everybody will figure that's a cliche, but now it's colloquial, proverbial wisdom, and therefore is lost all of its cogency. People do not take it in any particular serious. They do not analyze it and then take it in any manner that is particularly serious. That is, of getting over this urgency of being alive. Just this sense of urgency. That I repeat, to begin with, everyone has it. If you are sane, you do not have serious genetic, physical brain damage, there is a sense of urgency about being alive. And I don't mean in a negative sense, there's just a sense of urgency, which you can see is easily equates with being alive itself. It equates with surviving, as you must feel a sense of urgency to survive. Animals do it without thinking. Men can do it without thinking. But then when you do begin to think, let's say at the age of 4 or 5, and you begin to daydream and start speculating on the future and what I would like to do and what I would like to be, there is also a sense of urgency. And it's not made up, and we're not making a comment that some kid had a dream about being a famous opera singer and that you happen to hear him and his voice would make, dogs want to commit suicide, call Dr. Jack. It's not that. We're not commenting as the person had no talent. It is just simply that once you reach your program peak, and everyone has it, once you reach that peak, it's like you are then singing the song of, well, come on, baby, help me spend my money. Since that didn't seem to make any sense to you the first time, we'll try it a different way. It is the old, I can describe it cruder. It is like the old game of, well, I wish I could continue to work on my music, but damn, I look around now and I don't have it happen. It's just one of those things. But here I am, I got 2 kids, I got a wife, got a mortgage. I've got to get up and go to work. Now, it's easy to attack that, which I'm not doing. It would be easy to attack that and say, well, that's some kind of cheap way out. That's just somebody who had a spurious talent, and they decide not to pursue it. Nay, nay. For every musician right now that's famous, for every painter that's famous, for every writer that's famous, or put in another way, for everybody who is famous and successful to the point that others admire them, that they are some sort of hero or standard, for everyone who does that, in whatever field, how many millions, hundreds of millions, had the same sort of professed interest at one time, but did not do it? And you know the answer. It's not that they were all idiots. You can look at it another way. Life only needs so many Picassos at one time, so many Beethovens, so many Wilson Pickett's, so many George Joneses. I mean, just so much you can take, that's it. Men pursue, as I said, religion is by and large has always been what takes over. It's known also, you heard a item here, an item. A item. Screw that. You heard a item here. Sounds kind of Hawaiian. A item. I don't know. That's it. I don't speak bad English. I'm Hawaiian. You heard a item. It almost worked. I believed it. You heard a item here a while back. Well, I shouldn't make it more complicated. Religion, by and large, replaces, when people reach the point that, and they don't see it as an absolute date necessarily, but it's as a sense of urgency. You reached your program peak. This is physical, which is without question. Everybody has that. But there's also what you would think of, if you're ordinary, as your personality peak. But it is, you reach this program peak, and you're supposed to then sort of be grown up. You're supposed to, in a sense, give up. It is then, it just coincidentally seems to work in that most people find themselves attached either to a sexual partner, a family, a mortgage, some combination of all that. Just circumstances seem to give some excuse, some rationale for giving up. It is not an intellectual faux pas. It is not an artistic mistake. It is not a culture. It is not a creative weakness on your part. If you're ordinary, you have already been programmed. And you know I don't mean in some pseudo computerized. I'm talking about you've been programmed the same way as you've been programmed to grow up and have either black hair or brown hair, blue eyes, big ears, and that you're going to live 62 years more or less, all right? And you're going to be 5 feet tall. In the same way, is what I mean by programmed, your personality, your intellect, the sense of urgency about everything beyond the physical life is also programmed. Now, men have to believe otherwise, ordinary men, or else they would go what? To Akron? No, mad. Same thing. Okay, Jesus. I hate geographical sarcasm, don't you? Well, sure you do, because you're from Ohio, I can tell. But we'll let that. Of course, you can slide on the Ohio River. You can skate on it in the summertime, but that's another story. Everyone reaches a program peak, no matter how it appears, no matter what they say, and if you think back or if you feel back, you can feel it in you. That it was, and it's ordinarily referred to as being mature, and someone around you will even join in. It's the whole nexus, it is a whole model, it is a whole collective model of humanity that everyone is dancing together. There's the right kind of support. People will encourage you, your parents, your friends. There you are, you always wanted to be a musician. You hung around bars and you played for a while and you were trying to do something. You got this girl pregnant, her father threatened to kill you. You don't know, there's no excuse. Make up your own story along those lines. And now you stand at the bar with the guys that you've been playing music with all these years and you go, it looks like I'm going to have to marry her. It's either that or I'm going to have to leave town. I'm going to have to leave you guys because her old man is going to kill me. And so maybe there's some older guys. The older brothers of some of these musicians, maybe one of them standing there and you've kind of known him and he's lent you money and sort of been sort of like a big brother, and he says, hey, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know who you know it, but I used to play in a band in the same club when it was so-and-so name, and I know how you feel. I got my wife, you know so-and-so. I got her knocked up. I ended up having to, I worked down at the service, you know where I work. I had to give it up. I'm going to tell you the truth. How old are you now? And you say, well, 21, 20. You go, I know how you feel. And I thought, well, that's in my life. But, look around you. I mean, you want to be here at the age of 55 playing a joint like this, a VFW, or, Bruno's Black and Blue Lounge. Is this where you want to be at the age of 50? You'll have cirrhosis of the liver. You'll still be playing. Maybe you worked your way up to $30 a night. You never have any, I know how you feel, but, you can play on the weekend or something. It's not the end of the world. In other words, you have that kind of support. Now, I don't mean just psychological. It's the support of a whole structure. The structure being humanity. And it supports itself. I'm not talking about this pseudo or this ordinary family or friendship like, well, support people. Life supports itself. It's only those that are really hard up for something to do that'll say, well, we should support so-and-so. You're going to support him if you want to or not. You're going to support life. At any rate, there will be, you understand, that kind of story available. Someone will say, oh, it's not that bad. If you want my advice, and you might say, by then you go, well, I've always liked you. And he said, let me tell you the truth. Go ahead and get married. Go ahead, and if you have to, get a job. Maybe I can get you on down here at the Sheet Metal Works. But you can still play at night. I mean, you guys are only playing here Friday and Saturday. All you got to do is go off Friday. You don't have to work Saturday, and it's not that bad. And you kind of do it, and you think, yeah. You understand, life just seems to, things just sort of slide into it. They just sort of glide into it. But you have literally reached your program peak. The sense of urgency about being alive is now diminishing. Diminishing. At least I had the Christian charity, figuratively speaking, since I'm not charitable. Forget the other, but when I said in this item that once you reach your program peak, it diminishes. At least I didn't say it disappears, that you lose it. It diminishes. After that, it's very common for people to become more religious. Even if they grew up religious, take my example, and it doesn't have to be extreme, but all of you have been through, I'm sure, some form of it. Even if you grew up in a fairly, quote, religious household, if my fictitious guy character ends up, he's out playing in bars, we'll assume, he left home at 15, he's been playing in bars for the last 6 years, we'll assume that he's not a real heavy churchgoer, okay? But now that he's reached his peak, if the scenario goes the way that I just described, he goes ahead and he marries this girl. They get a little trailer, and he starts working down there at the sheet metal works and playing on the weekend maybe, and gets trying to save up money to maybe buy a bigger trailer or whatever. It'd be very likely, it just seems to work, that his wife, maybe she hadn't been that religious, but then after the baby's born and a year or so old, she might start saying on Saturday nights, won't you not drink as much tonight? I was just thinking, we're to go to church. My family's over there, and sometimes your family, won't we, for the kids' sake? And the guy doesn't know why. Maybe at first he goes, Then she keeps on for a little bit. You know how these kind of scenes go. You think it's just out of a movie. It's not out of a movie, it's out of life. Movies come out of life. And so you find the guy back. And maybe he's still drinking, and maybe drinking's against that. In other words, he may not be the poster boy for that religion, but he will start taking it more seriously verbally. He will even start saying, I probably shouldn't drink as much. I probably shouldn't be screwing around my wife every weekend. I ought to cut down now that I'm married. Maybe I should quit smoking dope. I don't know what. It becomes, though, a kind of comfort. Now, if we were going to look at this, which I was going to pull you with a slightly different direction, when you lose a sense of urgency about being alive, which you just do, and you also know, I said it wasn't just limited to that, but you know as a rule, just almost as a rule, once men, and women, I leave it to you, women got their own, quote, problems after they become pregnant, I know, but men, here it is, my fictitious guy, 21 or 22, and let's say that he's been in pretty good shape and even played football as long as he stayed in school to the age of 15 or 16, and he may still, and maybe it doesn't work out now, he's a drunk, out every weekend, and he looks pretty thin. He looks about like he did. Here he is 22, but he gets married, moves in with a girl, well, now they're married, and moves in a trailer. You do know, that's almost a given, that if you leave him for 6 months and come back to see him, and he's happily married now, well, he's married now, it's very likely he's put on 50 pounds. And there's a story for that. Well, now he's got good home cooking, and she makes him eat a lot. Yeah. I know it all fits. But that is literally the point, the sense of urgency about just being alive. And part of being alive is sex. And so now, in a sense, he is not as sexually active. His hormones may be going down already, but that's not necessarily the end of it. But the thing is now, his wife expects him home. And now the waitress and the kind of girls he'd pick up there at the club, let's say he's still playing on the weekend, it's not quite the same. It's just, remember, everything just coincidentally works out. He can say, well, geez, I'd like to get as much strange stuff as I used to, but, she drives me nuts. I mean, she's all right, but his sex life cuts down. And so then some of the other guys in the band could say, God, you realize you're getting fat? Look at that beer gut. Just all of a sudden, or, she's feeding you too many pancakes. And you think, if you was the guy, you think, well, yeah. But then in a sense, maybe they say, no wonder the girl's not paying attention to you like they used to. And you might think, well, that's true. And that doesn't seem quite, you can explain it. You say, well, geez, I couldn't pick them up like I used to anyway. I got to go home. I got the kid. You understand? All fits. You have reached the program peak as far as the sense of urgency about just being alive, staying in good shape, being sexually attractive. But you didn't decide it, and it was not getting married, it's not now having a wife, it's not now having a mortgage on a used trailer, it's none of that. Those are just the stories that work in. That's just the music. You're in the elevator going down, and that's the music playing. Well, if it makes you feel better, strike the down, you're in an elevator, and that's the music playing. Okay. The person will very likely become religious, in a sense, more so than they were. But religion, what I was going to say was, if I was going to point out the first part of this, subpart, that once you lose the sense of, or once you pass the peak of your programmed peak, vis-a-vis the sense of urgency of just being alive, physically and intellectually, although people don't think about it intellectually, but once you reach that peak, it starts diminishing. And when I was pointing out that then men, normally, life provides things to replace it. And I said, most people, the majority, the biggest replacement is religion. Now, the others I was going to point out, in a sense, do attempt to replace it in the sense that it seems to have something more connected to another sense of urgency, whereas religion replaces it, but not with a different type or substitute sense of urgency, almost with a comfort, with a reassurance that, you don't need a sense of urgency. Now, there are many ways to explain what religion does. Religion is the world's, at least this planet's, cosmic octopus. Because religion does almost everything, or it used to. But here's another way to look at it, is religion, just one of its many faces, would say to a person, if they ever approach religion in the sense that I'm describing it tonight on this premise, that you approach religion and said, I seem to have lost my sense of urgency. I don't know why it is. I'm not that old, but the sense of urgency I had about life and doing my thing, and I seem to have lost it. And the priest or the rabbi, the shaman, for those of you that don't like shaman, that just shows you don't know enough Rodgers and Hart songs about tomato and potato and who was the vice president? As you tell religion, well, I seem to have lost this sense of urgency that I had, and rather than it replacing it, what religion, just from one view, one of its jobs is to say, yes, yes. And here comes again the great benefit, great sales pitch of an afterlife. Yeah. But this is not forever. This is just a brief, just one scene that we're talking about if you join up with us, if you pursue religion, an infinite drama. And it will pick up. Perhaps you'll be a famous composer in the next world. All right, that's one. Another way that seems to be of a more mundane area would be people interested, say, in politics, in social questions, social problems. Government, but politics in the full sense of the word. As they look for that, is a sense of urgency, as witnessed by what a great verbal hobby discussing politics is. Person to person nowadays, what seems to be the most common counts, some of the biggest money-making, most popular radio and television programs are those based upon political commentaries, political debate, call-in radio shows that it's nothing but politics is all they talk about. From whatever view, it's just all about politics. It provides what appears to be, as opposed to religion being a sense of comfort, a sense of assurance of, well, you don't need. Yeah, we know you've lost that sense of urgency, but hey, you're grown, it's time, that was childish. No offense to your hobby, but now you should be mature. You should be interested in the kingdom of God. You should be interested in the afterlife. You should be now interested in more transcendental matters. And if you ask them what, they say, well, help us with a building fund. Light some more candles. Give us some more money. Because they don't know, but it's like a sense of comfort. At least you go there and there are hundreds or thousands, or you join one of the big religions, millions of people that also seem to give up. So you think, well, I can't be, at least I got company. You go there and it's nice soft music. You notice that, not even taking into consideration the composer's actual religion or lack thereof, you go in and they're playing Handel and Bach, and maybe a little Haydn, but you do not go in and they're playing anything written by James Brown or Thelonious Monk. It is all soothing. And so you're there and everyone seems to be soothed, and you think, well, there's no sense of urgency here. But the place is beautiful, it's calm, there's stained glass, and you're surrounded there in that one auditorium, that one edifice with hundreds of thousands of people, and you know for a fact that worldwide at that very moment are millions of people pursuing in that same kind of environment, pursuing that same sort of ritual. It just seems all right. But what would appear perhaps at first to be another side of it would be politics, which is just a form of religion. It's all a form of religion, as you've all by now figured out, I'm sure. But politics would seem to be, or social problems, is like something that could be done now, to be real concerned over hunger, injustice, whether the socialists will ever get back in power in France, or whether the right-wing Democrats will ever take power again in Italy. And really debating this kind of stuff and staying around the verge of fistfights, it's easy to make fun of that, except it seems to provide a sense of urgency. Sports does. Sports is almost cheating, is why it's so popular, because sports requires, shall we say, a modicum of intellectual investment. And I don't mean it's only stupidos that watch sports. I'll leave it to you to say that. Nowadays, it's got to have commentary. There's got to be some intellectual commentary, or else they wouldn't have sportscasters on top of the game. But anyway, it's cheating a little bit because it is primarily based upon even vicarious sense of urgency back to the physical level. But at any rate, they all seem to provide, in movies, you do not go to a movie to be put to sleep. You do not turn on TV, sort of, to go to sleep, unless you're already on. That is kind of dangerous, unless you're on the couch. Then you might as well, you can buy a metronome, for those of you who don't know it, an electric, for like $29, $30. A wind up cheaper, but at any rate, they're both cheaper than a television. But you do not go to a movie. Just back to entertainment. You do not go out to a nightclub. You do not go out to a concert to go to sleep, to be comforted. You simply do not. Which is, if you'd like to look at, is one reason that the attendance at nightclubs always surpasses that to symphonies. It is a sense of urgency provided. The sense of urgency, as it pertains to entertainment, as it pertains to that coming from without, that someone seemed to provide the sense of urgency. How about a little sidestep, maybe? It is all based upon a sham, in a sense. Now, follow, in a sham sense of urgency. Sham enthusiasm. Fake enthusiasm. And I say fake without squinting at my face, and it's not an attack. If you have already reached the peak of your program peak of your sense of urgency, then, and I've already described this, take what I've said, we'll offer on that premise for a minute, and there it goes, you've already passed it. You and everyone else start down here. So if you're going to pick it up somewhere else, and everybody else is already down there too, you understand whatever you get from them, in a sense, has got to be less than real, in the sense that it will not match what you were initially programmed to be. That's all I mean when I say fake enthusiasm. I don't mean it's a nefarious conscious plot on their part, but it is sham, it is fake, it is ersatz. All the way from politics, politics, priests, and parents. That about covers it. None of them know what they're talking about. But for them to get over their message, for you to be entertained, for you to vote for a guy, for you to support him, to use a politician, for you to follow a religion, to use a priest, for you to take advice is what I was using as parents, and plus it made a neat alliteration there with those 4 R's. But it all wraps up into all advice. All advice comes wrapped. If it has any promise of affecting you, it comes wrapped in sham enthusiasm. Without people sometimes they are aware of it. That's right, there's a good simple one. Politicians who get serious enough to take coaching, to pay someone, a public speaker, bring in a psychologist, a public speaker. Those who go into acting, obviously, as you'll see in a minute, when I said obviously. People who go into advertising, who go into the jingle work, to do voiceovers, to do commercials, they're taught, and preachers are taught. They're taught various tricks, they probably call them, or various approaches about modulating the voice, the tone of the voice, the volume. It's how to act. And they are, especially in advertising, and with acting with certain parts, but in all advertising, those, you know what voiceovers, people that you just hear their voice and they're showing a car or a cereal, they're taught that the voice should sound excited. I know sometimes they used to say that you should sound as though your voice is smiling. And if you just sort of turn your head, or on the radio, television, listen to a commercial, man or woman, they all have a certain similarity. The disc jockeys, whose primary job is selling something or other, they have that same sort of thing. It does not vary that much, even when you have a different accent or patois from one side of the country to the other, whether they're playing country music or blues or classical. there is that kind of smile, that attempted smile. But just listen, they'll talk about the cornflakes. They'll say, the new kind of cornflakes. Once you hear it, it's almost that you can take out whatever the thing was, and it is almost musical. It is a selling, a politician in those areas so blessed by having democracy to where we have to go out and vote rather than have somebody put a gun to our head and tell us they're in charge, whichever one you like. But in the areas where people can't suddenly be king, where you have to solicit people's support, a politician has got to, what do they call it, work up a certain kind of voter enthusiasm. But the common, since we're civilized, and it's these civilized areas that have that kind of political system, it is believed verbally that a man to stir up enthusiasm must have a good program, which is, I think in politics, behind the scenes they refer to, or they should, as unadulterated bipartisan bullshit. You know, the program doesn't matter, that doesn't mean anything. It's the enthusiasm. The program is anything based beyond the survival level. Of course, there would be a certain enthusiasm for a program if a politician said, vote for me, make me president or governor, and I guarantee you this. Every single person, we won't change taxes, they'll be just like they are, but every single person in this state, next year you'll get $50,000 directly from the government, and you will for the next 4 years. You're a shoo-in. You are a shoo-in. And it's not just the money, but you're back at the survival level. That is, it would be good for everyone's survival. But for a man to come up with a program that is some kind of arcane mishmash of what he has in mind for changing the curriculum of our public schools and how we need to start gradually to take the elementary grades of mathematics and push up, and he just starts describing whatever the general level of mathematics being taught in the public schools at grade 3 is now, and so that we should replace that level grade 4. Unless he's a great speaker, and then it doesn't matter anyway. But there is this fake enthusiasm. Remember, by fake, it's not a judgment. It is not real. That is why it must be faked, because there is no real sense of urgency. Now, the enthusiasm, do you see, I'm referring to what was initially the sense of urgency about being alive. A politician running for office, and he's got everything invested. He's worked up to this point of running for the Senate in his area. To him, it is a sense of urgency that I'm about to blow it. This is my last shot. Or a company putting out a new product, and they decide to invest, bet the farm, every piece of loose change that they still have left in the corporate till to push this new product, the new cornflakes. It is a sense of urgency then, but then to sell it, whether the president of the cereal company gets out or pays someone else, there is that sense of urgency in the voice which always sounds excited, which just looked at from a survival, just an ordinary view. It's not that hard to see. You know it's fake. You know it's kind of ridiculous. You're just used to it, but if you look, and there it is, whatever the little scene that they're portraying of trying to get your kid to eat a new cereal, or a woman trying to get her husband to eat a new one, he goes, no, 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 and he tastes it, and the voice goes, oh, or he goes, ah, I didn't know that bran could taste like this. And it's bright music, and looked at from one way, you could just say, you know, what idiocy. Of course, real idiocy, you go back and look, this is just a hobby. It's not any longer about eating. They don't have to say you're on eating. They're not saying, be sure and eat some food today. Yeah. They're not selling you on dining. They're selling you on the non-survival. It is non-urgent. It is not urgent. There's no sense of urgency in you eating, you know, Captain Goohead's bran flakes. There is a sense of urgency about eating, but you have already covered that if you're sane. That's already been established. You don't have to remind yourself to eat. But there is a sense of urgency for them to get you to eat this because you don't have to. No one has to. And so there has to be the sound of urgency and happiness and excitement. It has to be for a man to say, vote for me. You know, why? What the hell do I care? Vote for me. Or a priest say, yeah, it's a good thing, you know, join our church and, you know, whoever the best sales pitch, most people fear, and when you die, you'll come back to life. They got to sound excited. There has to be a certain kind of enthusiasm for it. Why? Because they do not know what they're talking about. Yeah. A more crude way would be to say it's all bullshit, but then, you know, then we might have children just tuned in, And they might not understand that all that means is that it's all vis-a-vis survival, it's all irrelevant. It is all fungible. It's interchangeable. It doesn't matter whether you eat Captain Goohead's bran flakes or whether you eat Mrs. Goohead's revised bran flakes. It is very likely it doesn't matter if you ever eat bran flakes or not, so long as you eat something that's more or less got some nourishment to it. And it does not matter, regardless, we're still not making judgment or interfering with one's hobby. It doesn't matter whether you vote for candidate X. If we're in a stable environment, say our country, where we are in 1994, the United States, and now it's becoming more and more the rest of the world. But I assume that somewhere it's just struck you as maybe a little titillating cold chill late at night. Or some of you should be grown up and it's just, hey, it doesn't matter whether you vote for the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter whether you vote for Mr. X or Ms. Y. It doesn't matter any more about that than it does whether you eat Captain Goohead's bran flakes or Mrs. Goohead's. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, but it must appear to matter. People pretend it matters. Not only those attempting to sell it, is why I was pointing out again, it's not applied. But they must have this kind of feigned enthusiasm. Eat so-and-so. Have you heard? As the actors on the little TV scene. The wife says, I noticed you quit eating bran flakes. Well, yeah, I tried them last year when you told me, but I hate that stuff. It tastes like chewing on shoe leather. Yeah, but wait till you taste this one. And you go, wow, what is that? You just used to hear it because, well, you wouldn't even listen. You wouldn't pay any attention if they did it in a monotone. You don't eat your bran flakes anymore. No, they don't taste good. Well, here's a new one. Try it. Boy, that's good. You know that. Or a politician comes out and says, I want to be governor real bad, and I'm just what this state needs. You don't know the positive changes I could make for everybody, and what I really need is for each and every one of you who is a concerned citizen, a good parent, is to actually get out there and work and get involved, not just to help me personally, but to help the cause of goodness and justice and bran flakes. They have to provide then, our parents, just so that you don't think I overlooked that, parents takes up for all other forms that are not covered by politics and priests just about. Parents offer advice. Here's the way you should live. But now any ordinary parent does not convey it on that basis. They do not say, I heard you got caught shoplifting up at Kmart today. You can't live like that. You've got to be honest. You can't steal. Right. Well, you laugh because it's silly. And so they have to do what? There's enthusiasm. Now, don't get lost. It has nothing to do with morality. They say it does, and et cetera. It has to do with being civilized and the parade not suddenly just taking a sidestep and smooshing you. Parents are no better and no worse than anyone else. No better than politicians, priests, because they are what? Humans. They have no idea what they're talking about, since no ordinary person does. So for a parent to say, listen, you can't steal, which gets into one of the areas that people like to turn into, quote, humor, kind of twisted humor, the little joke that people used to tell, a little scene. Here it goes. I heard you got caught shoplifting again. You can't steal it. You can't go through life just taking something because you want it. Little kid. Why? Well, it's not right. Why? Well, it's against hey, when somebody has something, you can't go take it. I mean, just because you think that they got lots of those? Yeah, they do. They had a whole counter full. Well, no, you're missing the point. They just you can't do that. Why? It's not funny. People normally, parents at least, maybe somebody that has a recollection of childhood, you'll get that kind of nervous giggle. But it's not funny. And the reason it's not funny, that is, because it has no punchline. It has no conclusion. I mean, it has a conclusion. I've already told you, and I'll tell you again, but nobody wants to face it. The reason that parents have to be enthusiastic and try and convey a sense of urgency, by God, you can't go through life taking what you want. Why do they have to put in that kind of enthusiasm? Because they don't know what they're talking about. And that's why it's not funny for a kid to go, why? They don't know why. They say, oh, you can't. And of course, if you're ordinary, obviously, you have to join in and agree. And if you're ordinary, and we're listening to some of this, you go, I'm not sure the point of this, but you're on the verge of either being insane or, you're getting to the point that it's becoming dangerously rebellious. That, you can't attack society like that. I'm not attacking society. I'm pointing out the way this works. I'm talking about the way life works. There is no answer. Parents do not know why. They don't know why not to steal. I'm not saying there's no reason not to steal. We're not even talking about that. But your parents don't know why. They don't know any more than asking a priest when they say, you should always pray once a day. You should always be here in temple once every Thursday. Whatever religion that is. Whatever they tell you, and it can be widespread. It can be part of the collective knowledge and wisdom of your locality. But if you say, well, why? They don't know why. Which, of course, they've got some to benefit. I guess parents, some of them still got a Dr. Spock's Raise Your Kid book, but at least religion's always got the Holy Writ, because it says so. They do not know why. If you ask somebody, the head of the cereal company, why are you spending millions of dollars trying to get people to eat your new brand cereal? Because we are convinced it is the best on the market. It is just, we just know that it'll be good for them, that they'll like it. Well, why are you so enthusiastic about it? Of course, there's one obvious one, which nobody can ever even get to that. It's not the point. What would be point blank reality is, well, I'm trying to sell a lot. Yeah. And you can't go out and say, buy this cereal because I want to make some money. We want more money. Buy it. It's brand new, and buy it. Buy it, boy, buy it. Buy it. You must provide. Life provides. It makes other humans do it. It makes them provide, other than that comforting side of religion, which religion is not exclusively that. Remember, I just pointed out that is one view of what religion does. But the rest of it, entertainment of all sorts, sports, politics, advice amongst people, chit-chat. There is always going on. It seems to be just part of being alive. There seems to be a certain vitality to people talking, and the more someone is trying to sell something, whether it be bran flakes or your opinion, your political view, whether try to convert somebody to your religious beliefs, you cannot stand there in a bar, in a church, on a street corner, in a convention hall, and do it in a monotone. You know that. That's why you laughed at me as soon as I did it a few minutes ago. You cannot do it. And you would normally think, well, there's nothing wrong with it. You're right, we couldn't. And so there's nothing wrong about creating a little theatrical excitement. If we don't take it seriously in life, when somebody says, boy, those bran flakes are the best I have ever had. Somebody can say, well, don't be silly. I don't think, boy, that'll make my whole life over. And from an ordinary view, you could say that there is nothing, not only is there nothing wrong with, but it's almost an agreeable side. It's almost an agreeable aspect of the interplay amongst humans to have this kind of enthusiasm, this kind of excitement. But the question I was presenting to you that people do not ask themselves that is profitable is why? You don't have to create a sense of urgency to live. You're born with it. In the same way that even now you can be past the program peak and no one has to tell you to eat. But now they have to say you on what to eat. You don't have to be sold on the fact of getting out of the weather when it begins to thunder and lightning, but they have to say you on move over to these condos, buy a home at such and such subdivision. And there has to be enthusiasm. And for parents, for society itself, to say you should not behave in that manner. You shouldn't take drugs. Why? Well, it's against the law. Which, if that meant anything, nobody's ever bought that. But you do understand. That's why there must be remedies, punishments. Because just saying, well, that's against the law, that's like civilization at its most deranged, whistling in the dark. It would be like, as represented by a parent in my little scene, you shouldn't steal, you cannot steal. Why? Well, it's against the law, for one thing. And it's like, that should be the final one. That's not even close to the final one. being against the laws never worked, is why they have to say, thou shalt not steal. And you think, well, screw you. And they go, if you do, we'll put you in jail for 10 years. And you go, well, you didn't explain it fully to begin with. Now I understand. See, and then you don't have to be enthusiastic, by the way, in case you never noticed. A judge, once you have been found guilty and he's sentencing you, all this enthusiasm of your defense attorney hollering about, oh, what a childhood, and oh, you could look at that poor. After that, once you've been found guilty, and it's, we find 10 years, a judge, you don't see a monotone in action. Most judges, if he's the one that happens to read the sentence, or at least he'll have to speak the sentence, if not read the verdict. He'll say, well, based upon the jury's finding, the laws of this state, I sentence you to serve at the state prison a term of not less than 10 years. Next case. If you want to hear non-committal, because he don't have to be. You wouldn't go looked at, not just from the judicial system, but from the way civilization works. So you would not buy into the first feigned enthusiasm of, don't steal, it's against the law, if nothing else. If you've got no sense of decency, at least it's against the law. And if you think, well, screw that, and you do it anyway, then, and they find you guilty, they no longer have to provide this feigned enthusiasm. Or smoke such and such brand, it tastes better. Once you're dying of cancer, of lung cancer, they don't have to be enthusiastic. A doctor doesn't say, wow, smoking is just torn up. You only got a piece of a lung left. Once it's all over. And that's just several forms. You can do it all sorts of ways to look at it in life. The question I was going to say that is a potential prophet is ask why it all has to be feigned. Because it is feigned in the sense that it is not required. But it is required in the sense that those things that normally motivate ordinary people, that they find to be of interest all the way from religion to advertising to entertainment, it must be presented with a sense of enthusiasm, of urgency even. But now if you can say, all right, it's not urgent. It is not life or death, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. So why do they have to do that? And then you ask yourself, why will I hear it in that way? Why will I take it and never think that I am putting up with or I am buying into, no harm done, I'm no worse off than anybody else. At the collective level, individual is another story. Why is it that I never realize that I am constantly pursuing that? And I don't mean that they necessarily made me do it, but I'm being encouraged, I'm being supported by a whole running drama of feigned enthusiasm, of excitement, of people saying, oh, the Lakers this year, get your tickets early. Look what the Lakers did this season. And next year it will be boom, boom, boom. It's all kinds of excitement. You go, well, that's just life. Right. The question is why? Then what I was going to get into, which we obviously not, is should this sort of thing, how are you going to present it? As being serious or not being serious? You're going to present it with kind of feigned enthusiasm? Real enthusiasm? Because I'm going to tell you, everything else, you've got to feign enthusiasm. You've got to fake it because no one knows what they're doing. You understand? That it's not pertinent. It's not required. And so everything from religion to politics, it has to be supported if it's going to survive at all, if it's going to be popular. It has got to have a kind of fake enthusiasm in the voice. The ones I don't think any of you ever appreciate, the involuntary body English and movements people do. If you watch them, reporters or people doing advertising, they can't even stop it. I guess they finally gave up trying to get, but a person will start talking and they can get the voice down like, you've got to eat these brand flavors. They're new and renewed. We don't have obviously time to go into that, but that is another part of it. That it's involuntary, but it's based upon that this is all an act, and they can't help it. They'll go, if you do not vote for me in my program, I am the people's best friend. Whatever it is they're doing, watch them, and they cannot stop it. The body is always trying to do something. Maybe that'll be a good place to pick up next time. But I was going to say, is then consider what I was trying to get you up to the point. Everything else requires a feigned enthusiasm, a fake sense of urgency to make it survive out in the world. Where in the hell does it leave this kind of stuff? I was going to suggest we could leave it at this. Either in twice worse shape, or 3 times better. Or